wind on the Hardanger Vita Plateau does not just blow, it screams. It strips the heat from your body in seconds, turning blood into sludge and skin into black, necrotic leather. In 1943, this frozen wasteland in Norway was the only thing standing between the civilized world and a nuclear apocalypse. Deep in the valley below, guarded by steep cliffs and 3,000 Nazi soldiers, sat a fortress, the Vemork hydroelectric plant. Inside, hidden behind thick concrete and heavy steel, the Third Reich was manufacturing the key ingredient for the atomic bomb: heavy water. If Hitler got the bomb, the war was over. London, Moscow, Washington, D.C., they would simply cease to exist. The Allies knew this. They had tried to stop it before. A few months earlier, the British launched Operation Freshman. It was a disaster. Two gliders carrying 34 British commandos crashed into the ice. They didn't die from the impact. They were captured by the Gestapo. They were tortured, lined up in the snow, and executed with a bullet to the back of the head. Their bodies were thrown into unmarked shallow graves. The message from the Nazis was clear: do not come here. This place is a tomb. But the heavy water was still flowing. The mission had to be done. This time they wouldn't send an army. They wouldn't send planes. They would send 6 young Norwegians, 6 men on skis armed with cheap submetral Hadoras and cyanide capsules, walking into the mouth of hell. Leading them was Joachim Runeberg. He was only 23 years old, a young man with the eyes of someone who had already accepted his own death. He knew the odds. He knew about the tortured British soldiers. He knew that if he was caught, the cyanide pill in his pocket was his best friend. Before they could even reach the target, they had to survive the wait. The team dropped onto the plateau, but they were miles off target. A blizzard swallowed them whole. For weeks, they lived in a tiny hunting cabin buried under snowdrifts. The cold was absolute, negative 30 degrees Celsius. Their food supplies ran out immediately. To survive, they hunted reindeer, but there was no meat left on the animals in winter. So these men, these elite soldiers, cut open the stomachs of the reindeer and ate the moss digested inside the animals' guts. It was a green, sour sludge mixed with bile. They ate it to keep their strength. They sat in the dark, cleaning their weapons. The Sten gun Mark II, a crude, stamped metal British submachine gun. It was prone to jamming in the cold, so they stripped them down, oiling every spring, praying the mechanism wouldn't freeze when they needed it most. Finally, the order came. February 27, 1943. They descended into the valley. The plant was built like a castle on a rock shelf. The only bridge was guarded by heavy machine guns and spotlights. A suicide run. But Runeberg saw a flaw. Below the bridge there was a ravine, a 600-foot drop into a frozen river. The Nazis didn't guard the ravine because they thought it was impossible to climb. In the dead of night, the team climbed down into the abyss. The ice cracked under their boots. The wind howled, masking the sound of their movement. They crossed the frozen river and began the ascent up the sheer cliff face on the other side. Fingers numb, muscles burning, they pulled themselves up, inch by inch, right under the noses of the German guards. They reached the perimeter fence. Runeberg didn't cut the wire. That would leave a trace. He found a cable tunnel leading into the heart of the facility. He signaled his men. They covered their faces, not for warmth, but so no one would see the fear or the determination in their eyes. Inside, the hum of the heavy water machinery was deafening. Runeberg and one other man, Kaser, broke into the production room. A Norwegian civilian was inside watching the gauges. He looked up, terrified, to see 2 ghosts in white camouflage pointing Sten guns at his chest. Runeberg signaled for silence. He didn't want to kill the man. He just wanted the machines. His hands, shaking from adrenaline and cold, began to place the explosive charges. Plastic explosives, molded around the heavy water electrolysis chambers. He set the fuses. Standard protocol was a 2-minute fuse, enough time to get out of the room and find cover. Runeberg looked at the charges. He looked at the civilian. He looked at the door. He knew that if the Nazis found the charges before they blew, the mission was a failure and the world would burn. He took his knife and cut the fuses. 30 seconds. He lit them. Run! They sprinted. They scrambled out of the tunnel and into the snow. Behind them, a dull thud shook the ground. Not a Hollywood explosion, but a constrained, muffled boom that shattered the high-concentration cylinders. The heavy water, months of production, gushed out onto the floor and down the drains. The sirens began to wail. Searchlights swept the mountain. 3,000 German soldiers woke up, grabbed their rifles, and poured out of the barracks. The hunt was on. Runneberg and his men didn't fight. They didn't stand their ground. They vanished. They clipped into their skis and pointed them toward the wildest, most dangerous part of the mountains. A storm was rolling in. Any sane person would seek shelter. Runneberg led his men straight into the blizzard. The Germans tried to follow, but their heavy equipment and lack of ski skills slowed them down. The Norwegians were ghosts. They skied for 200 miles, crossing the border into neutral Sweden. They were exhausted, starving, freezing, and haunted by what they had done. Hitler's dream of a nuclear bomb died that night, drowned in the drains of a Norwegian factory floor. Years later, when asked about the mission, Joachim Runneberg simply said, "There were a lot of things that were just luck and chance. But looking at the footprints they left in the snow, disappearing into the white darkness, you realize it wasn't luck. It was the terrifying capacity of human beings to endure the impossible, to freeze, to starve, and to walk into the dark so that the rest of the world could see the dawn."